So, that's a big deal. It's a big deal when we go over 100 folks. Happy Monday to everybody. It is like so hot outside. I went outside to go run this morning and I came right back in the house. I got down the street. I was like, I think I might have a heat stroke and I won't make it to 9 o'clock. So let me just walk back home and get in the house. So I still have on my gear, everybody, from this morning. Because I didn't even get far. I literally got back. But so it's hot, and I have to do this this photo shoot today, and they said they want me to be outside. I don't know how that's going. It's going to happen with a suit. They only wear a suit to both. I'm like, I'm going to melt. Human combustion might occur if I do that at 1:30 today. But anyway, happy Monday to you all, and it's good to see all your faces. And we're like getting close to the finish line, folks, like slowly but surely, but actually it's rapidly but surely, because it seems like things are moving very, very quickly, even though some people feel like we're not moving fast enough, right? But I have to say that I appreciate everything that you all are doing every single week to make all this happen, and we are being very mindful of how, and I think we probably should mute, everybody should try to mute their things. Like I'm hearing some hear some noise from the background. Okay, so I think it's going to be important that we all stay the course and that we don't allow, just the external factors to change our views of point of view, right? We have to make sure that we're okay, hold on. All right, I think that's better. Now I can't hear anybody else. Perfect. I think that's what happens when you have 136 people on here, but 37 now. So I think it's going to be important for us to not allow external factors to, guide our thinking. It is really going to be important for us to stay focused on what we need to do in ACPS, and not that we shouldn't think about what other school divisions are doing, because other school divisions have implications for us, right? But we need to be focused on what are our staff members saying? What are our students' needs? What is actually feasible for Alexandria City Public Schools, so that when we finalize our option, it's because this is what's best for ACPS, not because somebody else did it, right? So we just want to make sure we have justification for whatever decision that we choose, and your expertise is going to be key in order for this to happen. I think that we need to keep reminding everybody that you all talk to out there that health and safety of our staff and our students are a top priority. Number one priority, period, hands down. And we have to just keep saying that. We are not going to jeopardize the health and safety of our staff or our students, period. Right. And I think that you all need to make sure that you're just reinforcing that when you're talking out to the community. But this week is going to be the week that we have to start really making some tough decisions. So, as you all know, making decisions can sometimes be difficult, especially when, you're making this decision that can impact thousands of people, right? And I think it's going to be very important that, we are, one, having an open mind, two, speaking from our expertise on what should and shouldn't happen, as well as using our data to inform our decision making. And it's not just the survey data, because that's just one data point, right? It's also looking at some of this transportation data, looking at the whole CDC and VDOE guidelines data, and are we able to do the things that we would like to do and meet all of those guidelines or adhere to all of those guidelines? It's really what's going to be key for us. So a lot of work to be done, but this week, let's remember, it's all about collaboration. It's all about doing what's right for our students as well as our staff members, and we have to keep health and safety at the forefront. There was a recent article that was out about our work, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was actually positive because of the fact that it shared ACPS is trying to make sure that we evaluate what we need to make our decision, to make an informed decision, you know, so that when we come up with a decision, we're able to say, this is why we chose option whatever, right? And these were the implications that we considered. And this is what we're going to do to support you as a family. This is what we're going to do to support you as a staff member. You know, this is what we're going to do to support our students. So we want to be able, when we roll this information out, to be able to share, you know, the full comprehensive kind of plan that's going to happen as well. Whereas a lot of our other school divisions right now, they're releasing these options, but they have so many questions that are just unanswered. So we just need to make sure, and that's why I'm glad we have until August 7th, which is right around the corner, folks. You know, it sounds like it's a long time, but it's really not. Because today is July 20th, by the way. So we only have a couple of weeks. But I know that with your guidance, with our consultants, education elements who are like phenomenal, and then also Dr. Mazingo, who's also leading the way here with us, I know that we can make this happen, and I know it's going to be the best possible plan that we can have for ACPS. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Mazingo. I saw that there was a happy birthday wish to my fraternity brother out there, Mr. Duncan, so happy birthday. And Dr. Mazingo, I'm going to leave things to you.
Okay, good morning and happy Monday to everyone. Again, just want to thank you for your support. Thank you for the time you're putting in this, and he has already indicated, especially for your level of expertise and collaboration. I only have one comment this morning. I just came up with this when Dr. Hutchins was talking. DTS, and that stands for ACPS is determined to succeed. And we're going to succeed together on behalf of children because of all that you are doing. And as he indicated, I was thinking yesterday about the fact that August the 7th is right around the corner, right? And we just have a lot that we need to accomplish. But I started also reflecting on what has already been accomplished. So just want to say that we just need to, and me also, remember those norms. Let's try to guide our thinking, guide our time together by those norms. And if we keep doing what we are doing, we will certainly collectively make the best decision on behalf of children. So I don't want to take any more time. I want to turn it over to Sima and Christina so they can get us started with today. Thank you once again, and happy birthday to Mr. Duncan. Sima.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to kick us off
Christina,
again. My name is Christina Strunk. I was with you all last week, and I'm really excited to kick off this week with you all as well. We wanted to start with just kind of a global check-in to see how everyone is feeling. We know that there are a lot of moving pieces, and that as August 7th gets closer, that your feelings might be in a lot of different places. So if you all can add to the chat on a scale of 1 being really frustrated to 10 feeling really confident and empowered, how are you feeling this morning? So we'll spend a minute or two to give teams some time to add your number in. Seeing a really wide range, some 3s, some 8s, some people feeling an 11. So as you're adding in, checking in with how you're feeling, keep this in mind as we're doing our work today, that the people that you're collaborating with, the people that you're deciding with, might be feeling at a very different scale than you are. What we're going to really try and do today is make sure that we are really clear about the decisions that we're making right now, how we're going to make those decisions so that we can get the work moving forward to create a really strong educational vision for ACPS. So thank you for adding in how you're feeling. If you haven't already, feel free to keep going. Like Dr. Mazingo said, we also want to really make sure that we're keeping our norms front and center. So think about how often you're speaking. If you haven't stepped up, maybe take a step forward to add your ideas. If your voice is the loudest in the room, maybe step back. If you're able to, keep your video on so that we're building those connections. Feel free to use the chat throughout. We'll make sure to monitor and answer any questions that you're having, any resources that you need. And then again, as always, this is going to be recorded so that you can make sure to come back to it to look at ideas once we're finished closing out. So wanted to just start off after our check-in by sharing what we're going to do whole group and then what we're going to do in breakouts. So we're going to start this morning till about 9:30. We'll give you some updates on scheduling guidance. We'll have a quick empathy building exercise. Then we're going to go into our playbook overview and get really clear on what our tasks are this week. At 9:30, then we'll jump into our cross-functional planning teams, and we'll have time to actually dive into our playbooks and really focus on our core area guidance so that we can get to some decision making. So all of the Zoom links should be in the Google Doc, and we'll make sure to send those out once we are jumping into our teams. Again, to emphasize what has been said this morning, we want to move from having discussions and being in an informing stance really to designing and deciding. August 7th is coming up, and we really want to make sure that we're making the best decision for ACPS. We don't want to jump into making a decision based on just something that someone else is doing, but we really want to make sure that we're moving the work forward. So not just talking about it, but actually coming up with some decisions. So that's going to be our work today and this week. So you'll see that we're moving from our workbooks into our playbooks. And we have a ton to celebrate. We've gotten so much work done in the last couple of weeks. We started our cross-functional planning teams. We've started evaluating schedules. There are tests that have already happened late last week and over the weekend that we're going to meet and share a little bit more about later on. And we've gotten a lot of staff and family survey data that we've been reviewing to really build our understanding of the needs of ACPS so that when we're making those decisions, we're making the right decisions for our community.
Woohoo!
Which is huge. So just to give a quick update on where we're at with our scheduling prototype. So for those of you who aren't a part of the small scheduling subcrew, we met with a group of leaders across elementary, middle, and high school to start building out some tests of what could a hybrid schedule look like. What are some of the things that are coming up, some of the challenges that we're really going to need to design around if we go with a hybrid model? And so we're going to be meeting this afternoon again to share those tests out and to really begin building that division guidance for our educational vision. So what are the things that we need to do to be really clear on across the division? And where is there that opportunity for flexibility for each school level? So just know that we're going to have some more updates for you on Wednesday and use that to build out some more specific plans. So what we want to do in this sprint is continue building on all of the success that we've had in the past couple of weeks. We're going to be really refining our schedule prototype, so continuing to build out based on the learnings of those tests that we started last week. Thinking about what are the implications of feasibility, so thinking across finance, operations, budgeting, staffing, as we're getting more information, adding in those layers of nuance into our schedules to see what's going to really work for our community. We're also going to be building out those playbooks so that we can really give guidance to principals and school teams across our core areas. And we're going to, moving forward, have some community conversations to make sure that the work that we're doing is really informed by the people who are a part of these decisions. So wanted to also, because this week is going to be a lot of designing and deciding, start out with some design thinking. And design thinking might be a cycle that you're familiar with, or it might be really new to you. We'll go more into detail later on this week, but really powerful design thinking always begins with empathy. We can't create designs for our community if we don't keep our community in mind. So we wanted to start off by grounding ourselves by designing for someone at the margins. So take a moment and think about a student or maybe a staff member or maybe both who's at the margins that you really want to hold front of mind during this design process. If it's possible, be specific and choose a specific person, or you could decide to choose a persona. So you might be thinking about whose voice is usually missing from this conversation. You could think about what type of student might not be a part of this conversation, a part of the designs. We really want to push ourselves to think about someone specific. So we don't want to design at the center for a model that might work for most. By picking someone at the margins, we're really going to build designs that work across a variety of stakeholders. So I'll give you a second to just think about that person. If you want to write their name on a Post-it or a piece of paper, we're going to come back to them throughout this week, really seeing how the things that we're designing would impact that person, whether it's a student or a staff member. So I want to give you a moment to choose that person, think about who they are, and if you have a piece of paper, even just a note app on your phone or on your computer, try and write their name down or who they are. As you've chosen someone at the margins that you really want to hold throughout this design process, I also added a link in the chat for you to explore later on. It's an article from Mindshift, one of the podcasts from NPR, really thinking through how, if we can build a model for students at the margins, we can really design something extraordinary for our reopening plans. So feel free to open that article and read it later on. The next step that you might want to do once you build the person that you're going to keep in the forefront during this design process is think about yourself. So we know that it's a really important piece of equity work to begin thinking about your own identity. We want to bring that to the conversation today. So think about how your identity does or does not align with the person that you've chosen. How are you different from the person that you chose? How are your experiences different? And how can you make sure to hold both of these things as true when you're designing? So we don't want to design a system that just works for ourselves or people who are in the same group as us, but really making sure that we're pushing ourselves to design for a variety of experiences and identities. Anything you want to add, Sima, before we jump into the next piece?
I'll only add that this is our work this week more broadly across the cross-functional planning teams. The school and community relations team is conducting a number of community conversations this week to gather additional input. And we also have both qualitative and quantitative data for you to look at today more deeply that's been prepared by Clint and his team. So as you hold this person in your head and your heart, we also will be providing additional data.
Thanks, Sima. And now I believe I'm going to toss it over to Dominic to talk through the next piece.
Good morning. Appreciate everybody being on the call. I'm hoping everybody can hear me right now. But on this slide, we see all of ACPS's budget because we have to know what our constraints are. And obviously, the almighty dollar is definitely one of our constraints that we have to work within as we go about our reopening plan. So we know our operating budget, which does about 92% of the work here in ACPS, is about $286.6 million. Through the CARES Act, we will also receive about another $3.7 million and then another $51,000 through the Set Aside CARES Act for special education services. Out of that 3.7, about 400,000 will be provided to the private schools here within Alexandria as a part of the equitable services piece under the CARES Act. I'm showing you all the entire budget. So this is the global view for ACPS because we have to tear down the silos. For instance, it's no longer TC Williams' budget, FSD's budget, CNI's budget, tech services budget. it's ACPS's budget, and all of the funds will have to be used on what's best for reopening schools for all of the children throughout ACPS. So if we can go to the next slide. So some of the things that we know between the two different models, again, one of the sayings that we have in our financial management cross-functional planning team is we can do anything, we just can't do everything. So that means that, you know, with almost $300 million, that means there's a lot of things that we can get done, but it doesn't mean that the entirety of the globe can be done, right? The $300 million is still a finite number. And some of the things that we've defined so far in our planning groups kind of helps us understand what would have to be done in the hybrid model and what would have to be done in the virtual model. So with the hybrid model, that includes students coming on campus. So we know that with safety being the #1 priority, as Dr. Hudson said at the beginning, we know that we're going to need a certain amount of PPE for staff and students, screening equipment, cleaning, janitorial, safety infrastructure improvements in our schools, whether we're putting up plexiglass in main offices and so forth. And then how do we keep our vehicles for transporting the students safe and clean as well. And then other priorities were meal distribution, then the technology infrastructure that would be needed to support the social emotional academic learning of students, the wireless connectivity, professional learning, and so many other things as well. We know if we move over to the virtual model, 100% virtual, a lot of the on-site items we wouldn't have to increase. It would be, we still have to do all of the technology things. So with the information that's been shared thus far, at the surface, it appears that, you know, the 100% virtual aren't going to need as many additional funding sources to provide or shifting. So we know whichever model that we go to, we're going to have to be shifting money across the ACPS, right? Because we know that there's going to be an increased level of cleaning that needs to be done, an increased level of tech infrastructure that needs to be purchased. For instance, our pre-K to 3 students would need hardware devices in either one of the models, whether we do hybrid or virtual. They're going to need some type of device to be able to connect with teachers and counselors and so forth. So with that being said, we know that there's going to be some things that have to be given up. So helping build a feasibility analysis, we have to start to define all of our assumptions across the board. So far, we know we have the assumption of our operating budget, our CARES Act funding, we have the facility capacity number and the transportation capacity number. With the budget, this obviously assumes that the revenue will not decrease, but we know that that is a possibility that come October, we could see the state sales tax revenue decreasing, and the city of Alexandria has already said that they may have to relook at their budget in the fall and winter as well. So this right now is assuming that that doesn't happen. And then there's a lot of remaining assumptions that we'll need to help build the feasibility analysis. What are the required PPE, cleaning, infrastructure improvements, and so forth. Once we start defining what is required, then we can go out and start costing these things out, because it'll let us know where we have to shift money to be able to do these things. Perhaps we can get some of these things done with the amount of budget that is allocated to these major objects, but most likely we're going to have to shift money away from some of the things. So we're going to have to decide what isn't going to be done. And one of the things that's been discussed in the financial management team is letting everybody know which major objects would receive a decrease to be able to support these other things. So for instance, if we went to the 100% virtual model and we're not transporting students anymore, then are there areas within the transportation office that can be reduced to help buy technology infrastructure or professional development for teaching in an online environment for our teachers? So as we go through, we just still need to finish these remaining assumptions, start to understanding what we're going to require, and then that can help us put dollars behind things and determine if we're going to have enough money to do one versus the other. that's all for me.
Thank you, Dominic.
Dominic, I had a quick question for you that if you can go back to your initial slide, can you share out, like, did you already mention like how we got to those numbers for the CARE Act funding for facilities, transportation, meal distribution, SEAL, technology, infrastructure, and then that contingency? Did you share that?
Sure, I did not. So the breakdown for these different items are, so one, the Equitable Service Act, for those that don't know, we've chosen to use the funding for the CARES Act to support all of ACPS, not just Title I schools. So with doing that, we have to make the funding available for the private schools within the city of Alexandria as well. As the Secretary of Education said, the CARES Act funding should be used to support all students, not just public school students. So that's why you'll see the estimated portion for the equitable services for private schools is a little bit under 400,000. And then we broke out 35% for facilities and transportation, 15% for CO meal distribution and a contingency, and then 20% for technology infrastructure. The original thought behind that was because, again, safety and health being the #1 priority, if we were going to have people back on site, we know that the facilities and transportation group are going to require a lion's share of additional funding. And then behind that, we know that technology hardware purchases to be able to support students while they're not coming into school was going to be another large purchase. The contingency there is, again, as we move through, and we're going to have to be flexible because we might start in one model and then have to pivot to a different model. We need to be able to have some funding that hasn't been earmarked for anything specific. So when we do change models, if or when we do change models, we have funding to be able to assist there, because when we go with the 100% virtual, there is going to be a lot of one-time costs that have to be expended. And then when we shift back to on-site eventually in the future, we have to pick up a lot of ongoing expenditures, right? So buying a computer is a one-time cost, but the electricity going through our buildings are ongoing expenditures. So we have to be mindful of that. Obviously, if we shift between different models, the allocation between these different groups can change. For instance, if we go with all virtual and we understand that technology is going to be a heavier lift, we can shift this funding between the 4 different groups that we have here.
So I hear you saying that $400,000 off the bat has been taken out due to the equitable services for private schools. And this is from U.S. Secretary Betsy DeVos, and saying that these funds have to go all over the place, which I don't get, but that's a whole nother story. And then you also set aside contingency funding because there are going to be situations in the future that are unforeseen, that we want to make sure we have some dollars set aside to assist with what any shifts or pivots that we might have to do that we just don't know about right now. And then did you say the facilities and transportation is 35% of the budget, and then the meal distribution, SEAL, and the contingency is it 20% or 15%? What did you say? What was the percentage?
15. Each one of those items represent 15%.
And then technology infrastructure is 20.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. I just think it's important for people to understand, you know, those percentages and where we are with that. And then I think I hear you saying, in addition to the CARE Act funding, we need to look within our operating budget at things that we cannot do or that we won't do, right? And those things that we won't do for 100% virtual may be different from the things that we won't do for a hybrid. Is that correct too?
That
so
is
should
correct.
We be looking at both, you know, like so the team be saying, okay, if we did 100% hybrid, we don't need X, Y, and Z. If we do, if we do 100% virtual, excuse me, if we did 100% virtual, we don't need X, Y, and Z. If we did a hybrid option, we don't need X, Y, and Z. So you should be looking from both angles, because some things might overlap, but everything may not.
That is correct. So part of the financial management cross-functional planning team, we looked at some of the major object categories throughout ACPS to try to identify what are some of the major object categories that we felt would need additional support depending on the model, and then which are some of the major object categories that we could reduce depending on which one of the models. For instance, field trips. If we go 100% virtual, schools won't be spending money on field trips, at least while we're 100% virtual. So we know that that could be used to support technology. We also know that for instance, like things like the parking incentive, if we're virtual and we're still working from home, we know that we can take the parking incentive and use that to support technology or so forth. Overtime, and our biggest overtime use is in the transportation office. If we're not transporting anybody, then we won't be spending any overtime while we're virtual. So that's another area that there's funding, substitute teaching, so forth and so forth. So we've identified a lot of the different major categories that we could decrease to be able to support other areas. And then what we're also talking about is just being able to provide the guidance to principals and then directors to say, these are the categories that we're going to be reducing to be able to essentially provide a pot of money to support the facilities and transportation needs and the tech services and CO needs, depending on the model that we go forward with.
Dominic, thank you so much for this explanation. I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and I wanted to call attention. There's a lot here around staffing. So there's some here around assumptions around new hires. Also, I'm scrolling down and seeing about salaries for support staff, or maybe casual employees that are supporting the academic setting. So wondering if you can provide any comments on that, or if someone else wants to jump in too.
Sure. So when it comes to the human resource capacity constraint, that's out of the financial management's wheelhouse. But when it comes to the hiring freeze, we said when we put together the revised 21 budget that we would have non-classroom positions would be frozen, and then they would have to go through a review process and ultimately approved by the superintendent before they can be advertised to be filled. That process is still in development, but non-classroom positions would be held vacant until they go through that review process. Again, depending on the model that we go back with, will depend on the intermittent staffing that would be hired, because again, if we're all virtual, some of the intermittent staffing that we would typically hire in the past may not be needed. But if we go back in a hybrid model, we may need additional intermittent staffing for the custodial work or for our transportation office. So again, excuse me, that will affect that. Also the PACE stipends or the supplements that we give for different extra duties that employees pick up, such as like bus duty or department head or so forth. Those things there's about close to $3 million in supplemental pay throughout ACPS. So those things would be looked at. Again, coming out of the financial management group, our principals there said that we could potentially reduce those and allow the principals to then decide how they would use the remaining funding to support the efforts within their school. So again, that could be a way that we could find extra resources for these things. We know athletics, there's different seasons that would be canceled, so we know the stipends for those could become available and so forth. I don't know if the HR group wants to talk more specific to what the human resource capacity constraints are or not, but from a budget standpoint, from a money standpoint, 88% of our budget are in salaries and benefits. So we definitely would have to look there for any savings that we could shift to other areas.
Thank you for the explanation, Dominic. I think it's important for people to hear kind of the background of how the funding works, because a lot of times people, especially in our community, just assume we have like this bottomless pit of money where that it's just money just coming. And we have to remind folks we had to cut our budget prior to even getting into this work. So this past June, the board had to approve to, reduce our budget. By, and I forgot the number now, was it $12 million? What was the actual number?
It was right around $12 million.
Yeah, got it. All right, I try to keep all these numbers in my head, but yeah, I mean, I think the bottom. That's why I'm glad we have a CFO to help me when I can't remember. But I think it's important for us to keep all that in mind. And even when you're looking at the CARES Act funding of the 3.7 million, that goes by really quickly, as you can see. I mean, you can spend that very fast with some of the expenditures that we will have due to this global pandemic. And I think another point that I think is very important for our community as well as for the team here to understand is the percentage of our operating budget, which is allocated to salaries. I mean, you look at $286 million, almost 180 million of it is to salaries, so that's like about 86%, something like 85%, somewhere around there. Or it might even be 88. What's that percentage, Dominic?
So between the salaries and employee benefits, it's roughly 88% of the total budget.
Got it.
So only 12% of the budget is non-personnel.
Yeah, which I think is very important for people to understand too. To know the majority of our budget are really the employees, the people who are within the organization, not necessarily the services and materials that we also have to provide. All right, so I think we should. I'm going to stop talking there. I just wanted to reiterate.
If I could, just one more thing. I was able to see some of the questions and the comments off to the side here that are saying, are there funds for additional nurses for like a screening room? There should be savings for utilities and so forth. So all of those questions have to be answered by the different groups, right? Because if it's going to be required to have the additional nurses, if we come back on site, then we have to look for the money to be able to find additional nurses. As far as utility costs for the different buildings, that again, the facilities would help determine that, because just because we're not in the building doesn't mean that we can shut everything down within the building. So while there could be savings for sure on different utilities such as water, sewage, electricity, and so forth, we know that it's not going to be like $0, right? Because we still have to run our buildings even if there aren't people in them. So just some things to consider, and as the other groups start to define what is required, then we can start to put the dollars behind what we're trying.
Thank you, Dominic. You're getting a good amount of love in the chat too, and appreciation for your update this morning. So thank you. I want to keep us moving and get you guys out into your groups in the next couple minutes. So as a reminder, as we talk about moving from discussions and information into designing and deciding, we're moving into these two right-hand columns of deliverables. So we're going to be discussing this week in our cross-functional planning teams, both the aspects around the scheduling work group and the different prototypes, and also over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the playbooks. We're moving this week out of the workbooks and into the playbooks. And what the teams will be digging into is, how do we pull out the decisions, how do we pull out the guidance and put it in such a way that it is accessible to our principals, to our school leaders, and administrative staff, and then eventually out to the wider community, as Kurt and others have mentioned in the group chat. And these documents serve as the foundation of our comprehensive reopening plan. So when we think about putting together that final plan, you're actually starting to work on that this week, which I find to be kind of exciting, and also it can also be a bit nerve-wracking. At the same time, The chairs this week are going to be going through a feasibility analysis. Helen, I saw your question in the group chat. The feasibility is going to be across a lot of different factors, one of which is cost, but it's also going to be around capacity, which is why we've been discussing capacity and staffing as part of this whole group conversation of transportation and of school staff. It's also going to have to do with the feedback and preferences of our schools, our staff, and of our community and students. And that's why we've been having some of those survey results coming into this cross-functional planning team time. But feasibility will be a big part of this week's work. So we're going to release you out in the next few minutes. And we sent out a video with the facilitator guide and the materials. So hopefully you had about 10 minutes to watch that video. Christina, Natalie, and I have a lot of fun putting those together every week. We usually just send those out to the chairs, but this week we decided to send them out to everyone. So we hope you enjoyed seeing our faces. We do not pre-prep for those. So those are all off the cuff. So do not ask us to go through that same script again, but here's a summary. So the main things to work on this week are going to be the playbook and then confirming those decisions. So if you haven't finished that yet from last week, we can give you some time today in the beginning of your working session time to go into that, go back into the workbooks from last week, complete out those decisions. If you are the owner of those decisions, that means that you are empowered to make a recommendation in that decision. If you're not an owner and if you've identified a decision and you are not an owner and you do not have representation within your group of the department that would be the owner, mark that decision in yellow and let your chair know, and then we can discuss that tomorrow when we have our cross-chair meeting. Also, please provide if additional information is needed, and feel free to combine those decisions, delete those decisions, but those decisions came from, and just as a reminder, those came from the Virginia Department of Ed Essential Questions and our Thought Partner Guidance. Those were the guiding documents that then led to the set of decisions that you created. The next step is to explore your playbook. We have a sample playbook here. Each cross-functional planning team has your own playbook. I cannot lie, it is always a little difficult to add information into these, into a slide, into a Google slide, but we've created a format. So we have a couple of pieces of information in there and areas of guidance and directions on how to add in information into your playbook. You can see here on the upper left-hand side, everything that you see in yellow, we started to fill out. Natalie and Christina and I started to fill out for you. We started to pull in if you have a summary of your core area. We started to add that in here. We also added in criteria for success if it was in your workbook. We started to highlight some essential questions that were aligned to your area. And the what we heard section will actually be something that you'll be able to do today using survey data and other data if you have other data that you'd like to add in there. The area that really you'll be focusing on this week is the division guidance and school building action items. That'll be based on the decisions that you're making. And we have some additional guidance as to what to add in those sections in just a minute. To access the playbooks, there are links inside both this PowerPoint, this Google Slides, and also inside of the facilitator materials. So again, here's your group. Now we have created a slide per one of those playbook pages per core area. That doesn't mean do not feel constrained that you can only have one page. We are trying to have succinct amount of information. We are noticing that return plans and reopening plans for a lot of divisions and at the state level can be hundreds of pages long. So just as a note, we have started to highlight some of the, like what can be the organizer for each of the pages. And I think I saw Dr. Mann added in the chat earlier that there's some signups for CNI across these deeper topics, and you'll see that in the second column. So again, we tried to fill this out for you. If you don't see success criteria, it's because we couldn't find it. Does not mean it's not there. You guys have done a wonderful job of adding in a ton of information inside your workbooks. So if you want to pull out that success criteria, please add that in yourself. We also tried to add in the essential questions. If you have other essential questions you'd like to add in, please feel free to do that. And again, there's quantitative and qualitative survey results that are linked in one of the first pages of your playbooks. I'm getting a couple questions about how to access your playbooks. They are right here. It's on slide 21 of this presentation. Christina can add that into the chat. They're also in the facilitator guide. You'll see on slide 3 for step 3 of today, and I'm not sure if folks will get this far, but to add in division guidance and action steps, we have a couple of questions to ask yourself, to ask your team, but really this is the time at which we're designing and deciding and adding things into the playbooks. So with that,
before you conclude, I just wanted to say one thing really quickly. One, thank you for that, because I think it's important for everyone to see like how this work happens. And this is why it's so important to have an August 7th date, right? It would be impossible for us to go through why we're making our decision if we didn't have this time to be able to really dig deeper into implications, into finances, into feasibility, into transportation, into, you know, all of these pieces that are going to be so important, so that when we release a plan, we know why we released the plan. It's not just because, you know, we're not going to just use that term because of health and safety of our staff and students. To me, I think that's a cop-out. If that's the only thing, it needs to be that, and these implicate, you know, it needs to be the health and safety of our students is most important, and this was not feasible because of X, Y, and Z, right? We all want us to be able to articulate that, and it takes time to be able to really dig deep to do that. So I just wanted to make that point once again, I'm giving you all some sound bites as to why August 7th was the date, and we're staying true to our timeline. You know, everything that we laid out in June, right? This is not something we just haphazardly decided to put together. We really went through what was going to need to be covered, what amount of time it was going to take to do those items, and we did kind of like the whole end in mind design, backward design, to determine that August 7th date back in June, right? So we are right on schedule, which is a great thing. And hopefully we won't have to keep going back and saying, oh no, we did this. Oh no, we're going to do this. You know, and that's what a lot of people are doing in other school divisions, having to release a plan and go back with something different. And it becomes confusing when you do that. Not to say that things won't change after August 7th, because they could, right? But at least we're going to be as close to the year as possible that's reasonable for people to make decisions on how, you know, to meet the guidelines that we set. So just another soundbite as to why August 7th is important. I'm gonna keep reminding myself and reminding you all of why we can't really listen to all that external static of today. Sometimes we gotta just put on our, our ear pods and our AirPods in our ears and not listen to some of that.
Thank you for that. So just I sent the link to Sahar, who will send it out to all of the teams, and then I'll share my screen real quick so you know how to access materials again. For all of our facilitators who are the core area leads and the chairs, in your tools section, you'll see that all of the links to the playbooks are there, as well as all of the individual Zoom rooms. We also have new quantitative and qualitative data. And I'll make sure that actually is updated. Let's say qualitative. This one's going to be qualitative, and the second one is quantitative. Thank you. And so we have all of that data in there as well. I don't know if Clint wants to come off to mute to share anything else about the qualitative data that has been linked in for folks to see today.
Sure, I would be happy to. Sima, would you mind clicking on it just to open up the Google folder there? Here, I will unblank myself as well. So as Sima pulls that up, what the team did is we went through and are actively going through over 5,000 qualitative responses that we received from the Pulse survey in June to the question of what can ACPS do to feel you most comfortable in returning to in-person instruction. So we took all of those responses and, to the best of our ability, chunked them into thematics by the teams we're working in for planning. So having SEAL, but then also within SEAL, chunking them specifically to statements around accountability versus student services versus curriculum and instruction, so that folks could kind of quickly access comments germane to their area to review to best inform their thinking from what we heard from stakeholders again in June in regards to what ACPS could do to make them feel as comfortable as possible in returning to in-person instruction whenever that may be. And this is, and you'll see we also did it by bands. So you'll see we have kind of the parent responses broken out by grade levels, as those were important distinctions in terms of what we're hearing from different age ranges of students. And then as you continue to scroll, you'll hit a yellow section, which then has staff responses also broken out by grade level bands. This is part one of the qualitative data. So we wanted to give folks bites and not the entire elephant. So we will be delivering part two, which is an additional 2,000 responses, which we had to wait for translation on a bunch of responses. So that's why also we're kind of going through that in a second cut, and that will also be coming this week, but it's the same responses to the same question. It's just additional responses. And that is it for the qualitative.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we're ready to rock and roll. Just as a reminder, this is the major task for this week. So we have time today. We also have time on Wednesday. So don't feel stressed to finish this all in the next hour, but this is the major task for this week, so no other surprises. Anything else from the team before we close out and zoom into our individual Zoom rooms? All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming together this morning. Thank you to all of the voices that we heard this morning. And I will see some of you folks in individual rooms. Otherwise, I will see everyone on Wednesday. And as always, we'll stay in this room to continue to answer any questions or make sure that you are able to access the right room. Sayonara.